Well, welcome back to a very chilly North Devon. Just had our first frost, and this is the next episode of the Gentile Lady. Now, we've got masses of built structure. And we're going to need to clean these all up. So that's why I thought I would do a specific video for beginners on cleaning up your airframe. So in other words, sanding, shaping, and if we get time we're also going to talk about installing the gear. So the thing to remember is, and we're going to start with this structure first. So this structure at the moment, there is no top and bottom, but what we're going to have to do is we're leaving this trailing edge. We're going to leave that square, and what we're going to do is we're going to put a nice rounded finish on the front. So basically an airfoil section. I do believe that in the actual plan there will be some shapes for you to follow, but don't hold me on that because you can always use this. Now the problem we've got with this is that until it's covered it still can be, I mean this is fairly rigid anyway, but what we want to do is make sure that I'm going to show you the best way of sanding this without causing any damage. So the golden rule is we've got to support the structure while we're sanding. I'm going to be using just a cheap block of wood, and I've hot glued some sandpaper on here. This is an 80 grit. Now when you get a bit more experienced, you could look at getting yourself something like this. This is called a David's plane, and if I've thought about it, I'll put a little affiliate link down the bottom there for you to get one of these. But at the moment you don't need one of these. I'm going to try and do most of this if I can without having to spend extra money. So this is going to be a basic shaped airfoil. For those of you that are more experienced, know how to use these and want to go a little bit more slick with your airfoil section, then that's something that you can actually do. So let's show you how we're going to sand these structures and this structure without breaking them. Steel ruler, and what you want to do is you want this just the edge hanging over the bench. So remember, we're just doing this front section first. Now little tip here so you don't get confused, my advice is if we turn this over and just put a little dot on there, that tells me, that little dot tells me that that's going to be my undersurface. So I'm putting that on there like so. So it means that I end up sanding both sections the same way. So all I'm going to do, I've literally got just that hanging over the end of the bench. So I've got my this leading edge, just this front section here. I'm now going to put the ruler just where the leading edge finishes, and you can see I'm supporting that with my hands. Now I'm going to try and keep my hands out of the way as much as possible, and then all we're looking to do is we're looking to round that leading edge off. Now you'll notice that I am sweeping away from myself, and if I just move the steel ruler back a little bit, that allows you just look, that's all I'm doing. And what you want to do, that's all we need to do. Now my advice is, when you're doing this, if you can, just wear a simple face mask. So all you can see is I've just rounded the edge off of there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly the same for the other side, but I'm not taking quite as much off. So I'm just holding that there like so, and I'm just going to round that edge away. Notice how, if possible, I'm always just, where possible, trying to sweep away from myself, because remember in the past, like we said, what we don't want to do is bring it towards us and possibly catch it and buckle it up. So wherever possible. Right, so you can see the section. I'm not gone mad on that. I could do actually just a little bit more on the top. So again, I'm just going to put the ruler in place, and I just need to do just a little bit more. And what you want to do is, when you've done one side, just stop. And now what we're going to do, remembering that we want to keep it in the same sections, you're going to be turning this round. So I'm now going to be moving my ruler this side so we don't end up putting a section in the wrong way round. So I'm popping that on there like so, and then popping that on there, giving it some support, and then doing exactly the same thing. It's important just to try and have a look at this as you're going along, because it's quite possible to end up sanding heavier in one spot more than the other. So if it's your first go, it's always worth just stopping and having a look. But the key to this is, look how the steel ruler is supporting everything I'm doing. So I've done that. I'm just going to compare it to the other side. That's pretty good. It needs just a little bit more. The other nice thing is the laser burn marks give you a good idea of where you've actually been. So I'm just going to carry on with this one, and then we're going to get to doing the tip. Now, making sure we've got the top surface, we are now going to just give the wing tips a little bit of a taper. So again, I've got it just over the end of the bench. I've got my ruler to support, and this is very critical that you only sweep. We want more curve at the front to match the curve of the leading edge, and then all I'm doing is I am just going to round that off like so. Don't go mad. And then just underneath, I'm going to flip that over, and I am just going to literally just, see how I'm just rounding that round gently. That's all I'm doing for the underneath, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but that is what we're looking for. We don't need to go any more than that. You can just take the browning off the laser if you want, depending on the cover you're using. Right. See, I'm just rolling that block away. Beautiful. And I'm going to do exactly the same at the other end, making sure that we've still got the tail plane in the right direction, so we're facing upwards. Right, the last thing I'm going to do is making sure that your bench is nice and smooth and you haven't got any bits of glue on it. So I've got my block, and very gently I am just sweeping that across, just in case I've got any high spots. I can't feel any high spots, but just be very gentle. I'm hardly applying any pressure whatsoever, but I am just running that across just to make sure. So look, I'm almost like I'm just dragging that across like so, just to make sure that we've got no raised spots. This is why it's better not to use super glue, because if you've used super glue you'll get a very high rough spot, and what you'll find is the balsa around it will get sanded before the super glue. That's it. That's your first surface, your tail surface, finished. Right, so the first, we've got our two pieces of our fin and rudder which are going like so. Now the first bit, this bit, which is the front, we need a double curve. So whatever curve you put on here, you put on here. And also what we're going to do is we're going to just round this off. This back edge is staying square, and I'm going to show you why in a moment. So you can just sand the brown off square if you like. And the same thing is, we're just going to round either edge off, again supporting with the ruler. Right, so I've done 10 swipes that side. I'm now going to turn it over, and I'm now going to do 10 swipes the other side. It's a good way of making sure that you end up with a consistent curve. I'm talking to you lot, I've just gone and forgotten. Right, so the key to remember is, what we're looking for is a consistent curve either side. So don't go mad on this, because it's quite a thin structure already. So the next thing is we've got to do is we're doing the curve. So again, I'm supporting it right at the end with the and then, so remembering we want the edge square. So most of your sanding is going to be at the front to carry that taper along. Curved edge either side. Now all we're going to do is again just very gently just giving that a little bit of a wipe just to make sure that everything, there's no joints are sticking up. Notice how I'm sweeping away. If I was to come back and accidentally catch this, I'll lift it and then we'll end up breaking it. And then just have a good feel round. There's nothing sticking up. That's lovely. Now that's that bit done. I'm just going to run that down there just to take the brown staining from the burn off. But you need to keep this one square, like so. Right, now let's talk about this one. So I'm having some steaming up issues here because it's so cold in the cabin and the cameras are not liking it now. So right, so this is how it's configured. We can't have, because this has got to move, and it's not going to move over a square edge. Now there are a couple of different ways of hinging this and covering this. You can use your covering to actually cover both sides and then use an extra little bit of film and then use that as the hinge. I intend to use some hinge tape from Angel Wing Designs, which is this here, which you can get on their website. Now obviously the issue is we can't have square on a square. So what I intend to do is one side, I'm going to round this off, and I'm going to round that off, the back edge, the trailing edge, and I'm just going to round those off as well, because that will match the so round it off at the back but not so much to the front, because then that's going to match the square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut myself, or I'm going to sand myself a taper down one side at 45 degrees. So I'll, if I can, I'll show you on a piece of paper what we're actually looking for. So we want a taper, so that's going to be glued to that, sorry, that's going to be taped there like so, and the 45-degree taper is going to allow that to move, because it's naturally going to move the other side because you've got the hinge line. So I'm just going to sand this and sand the 45-degree angle across there as neatly as possible. You can, again, if you've got one of these David's planes, literally 4 strokes of that and you'd be done. But I am doing this for the complete beginner. You know, even if you were down to you're only using one of those, you can do it, but you just have to be making sure that you make consistent swipes. my advice is, if you can, get yourself a sanding block that the sandpaper's on, because that will give you a nice consistent angle. Let me show you how I'm going to do it. And then very gently just take the fluff off. Now when we put this back on the bench like so, you can see that that is, there's going to be a little gap between the hinge anyway, but that's absolutely perfect. Look, it's not lifting, so I've got plenty of movement there, and you can just look down that hinge line and actually see if anything comes into contact before anything else, and all my contacting at about the same time. That's perfect. Right, so the very last thing we've got of the tail surfaces to finish is the elevator. Now remember that the elevator, it tapers, it's been pre-cut and it's tapered, so we're going to have to put an angle down one edge at the front. That's to allow it to move up and down exactly the same way as we did in the rudder. Now my advice, I'm going to do this with a sanding block. This is a classic where one of these planers would be brilliant, but because this is a training glider, we don't necessarily have to make this super thin at the back. But what we're looking to do is to keep the undersurface flat, and we want to slowly taper from the front of here to the back. And if you can get down to about sort of 1 or 2 mil, that would be brilliant, but it's not hypercritical. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this on the bench, and I'm just going to gently sand away, checking that I've got what you're looking for more than anything is, I'd rather have a slightly thicker section than it's consistent than a very thin section but it's inconsistent. So let's just show you how we're going to do the hinged edge and also the trailing edge. Let's start with the trailing edge. There's going to be a fair bit of sanding going on here, I'll warn you now. So there's the taper that I'm looking for. That's absolutely superb. And now all we've got to remember is that one side of this we're going to taper, because obviously we want that to be able to move up and down, because at the moment where it's square we're not going to get the movement. So what we've got to do is one side we're just going to take an angle off at about 45 degrees. Now again, you can do this with a sanding block, or if you're dead skillful you can use a David's plane. And I'm just going to take this off. There we go. And then I'm just going to finish that off with a little bit of sandpaper. And that's what you're looking for, so that now means we'll get, because we're going to hinge the top, this will now be able to move down, and obviously we don't have to worry about it going up, but that's the angle that you're looking for. Okay, so we've done our tail surfaces, and now the thing we're going to need to do is to do the 4 panels. The trailing edge, just be very careful if you're sanding or planing that you don't catch the ribs. Good little tip there is if you put your ruler about that thickness up there and then support it, and again if you can try and get a nice consistent taper all the way across, very much like the elevator, then that's fine. Then the other thing we've got to do is we've got to do the leading edge. It will be a shape on the plan for you to follow. You can again use sandpaper, but I'm going to use this David's plane, and I'm going to just take the leading edge off. I think what I'll do is I'm going to sand one to shape, and then I'll show you what it looks like. That'll give you the best idea. You don't want hours of me videoing sanding, so I'm just going to get this one to shape, and then I'll show you what I've come up with. Right, there you go. That's what you're looking for. That's the profile. So I've mainly curved the top. Now, a little tip here. What I've done is that I've just rolled that over, obviously supported by the bench, and I've got a nice flat edge, or it's super smooth between the leading edge and this sheeting, and then just go over wherever you've got those joins, look, just there. So again, support it on the bench and just have a feel to see if you've got any bits that feel like they're standing proud, because that will show up in the covering. And the trailing edge, I've not gone mad. I've literally just taken, I've not gone as mad as the trailing edge on the elevator. We're going to have a band protection here for the elastic bands to go over, but we don't want this too thin anyway, because obviously the elastic bands are going to go over it. So that's what you're looking for, that sort of shape. I'm going to crack on with the other 4, and then when I get to the tips, I'm just going to show you what to do with the tip. So again, I'm just going to shape the tip. So remember, we've got our wing tips are looking like this at the moment, with that just whacked on. And then I'm going to show you what this looks like, so what you should achieve at the end. Right, there you go. There's my tip. That's my artistic impression of how it should look. I've done exactly the same on the trailing edge, exactly the same on the leading edge. Actually, a good tip is if you get the panel, the main panel that you've done, and then just compare it to make sure what you really want is a uniform shape. I mean, even if you just round the edge off, at this stage, if you're a beginner, we're not looking at, you know, getting that finite detail, but if you can get yourself a shape like that, then it's a win. But if it's a little bit more round, don't panic. If you're only using sandpaper, then that's fine, but what we're looking for is a lovely curved top and a fairly flat bottom. So anyway, I'm just going to finish off the other 2 wings, and then I'll show you about the fuselage. Right, we've got all our 4 wing panels done. We're not joining them yet because I just want to do a whole thing on sanding first. So the final thing we've got to do is the fuselage. Best tip here, leave the nose till last, and then I am literally just going to use this block. Don't use a plane or a knife. You should just have the minimalist edge, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the side of the bench. Now, do the sides first, like so, and support it. Don't do it like this, but support it on the bench. Do the sides first. When you've done the 2 sides of the sheeting, then what you can do is just give yourself a nice rounded edge. So don't go too thin on this, because remember, this sheeting is part of the structure. So just sand it flat to the sides, and then just give it a little lick round. And I'll just finish this off, and then I'll show you what we're going to do with the nose. Right, so I've sanded them all flat. And then you can see, look, I've just rounded the edge off very lightly. Just use my fine grit sandpaper. And then, oh yeah, by the way, wear a mask when you're normally doing it. And I normally have the hoover going when I'm doing this. So, the nose. To be honest with you, you don't want to make the nose too pointy for safety reasons. So what I would normally suggest is you do, is if you carry that taper on, like so, but then just over accentuate. Now there's a number of ways you can do this. You could possibly get away with carving it with a knife. I wouldn't try that. You could use a plane just to take just a little bit off, but don't go, I would say I'd come in no more than 3 or 4 mil, and I would just keep that shape like that as is, and then I would just taper this little bit in just a bit, and just slowly taper it to the front. But what you want to try and do is obviously match the sanding on one side to the other. Now if you're super clever, you can put a little on it. If you've got a sander, belt sander, you can put it on there and do it very quickly, but it wouldn't take you 30 seconds to do that with some with a coarse grain sandpaper. And then so I'd say I'd follow that shape, and then I would taper this in by about 3 or 4 mil, but don't go mad on that, because what you got to think of, what you don't want, although we'd love it really aerodynamic, we'd love it really mega pointy. we always got to think about if that was to hit somebody in the head. So just don't overdo it, basically. So I'm going to finish this off. I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll get on to the next stage. There you go. One nose, not gone over the top, but it's all, just have a feel round. Got any sharp spots, then just obviously just close your eyes, have a feel round, and you'll see if there's any sharp spots on there. But yeah, don't go mad with the rounding of the edges, but just very neatly, just give it a little gentle lick. But that's absolutely fine now. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put this to one side, because that's ready to now cover and put the installation of the gear in. Let's join the wings together, and then we can start thinking about covering. Okay, joining the wings. Obviously make sure that you've sanded any sort of that's protruding to stop them joining together. Little tip here: if you find they're rocking slightly and you've got a bit of a gap either front or the back, just make sure that the length of the dihedral brace, this bit, is not actually rubbing against the opposing rib, because sometimes they might just need a little bit of sanding. So this is what I've done. I've used a template. Now I believe in your kit there will be a dihedral brace with measurements. So this is what I've done. I put a dihedral brace here. I've got some sacrificial tape. I've got a weight on the other wing, and I've just glued those together. I used alphatic glue, so I'm going to do exactly the same now on the tip. So I'm going to weight this down and then put this tip down. So this will get weighted down, and then I'll put the tip on with the next dihedral brace, because you'll end up with what we call polyhedral. So you've got a dihedral here and then a dihedral out to the tip, and then do both sides, and then that is your wing finished, ready for covering. Right, there we go. Whoa. So that's now done. We've sanded the fuselage, we have sanded all our tail sections. So I'm not going to do a covering video, because I've done plenty of covering videos before, and I'd like to get on and finish this glider. So I'm going to put this away safe. My advice to you is, if this is the first covering, check out my videos, and I'll put a link on the top. At the end of this video there'll be a link to the covering videos that I've done, and I'm going to start. My advice to you is, if it's the first time you've ever done any covering, just start off with something small and then slowly build up. But also, top tips: make sure that your bench is lovely and clean. You've got no dust, no bits and pieces kicking around. It's got to be dust free. And also, when you do your covering, use a very sharp pair of scissors, or get yourself a new blade in your knife ready to cut the edges.